Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways, Torah Life Ministries. Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries, and I wanted to get to Torah Parashah this week done during the week, but I've been so busy here in Toronto that I haven't had time to do it till now, but it's still just in time because Shabbat isn't until tomorrow. But we're going to get to this week's Torah Parashah, and this week we're already up to the reading of the ninth reading of the cycle. And this week we're going to be looking at Genesis 37:1 to 40:23. And it gives, there's so much in this week's reading, but basically we're going to focus on one or two things, because here at Torah Life Ministries we teach about health and also modesty according to the scriptures, and we use Torah as our guideline because the Torah is the guidelines and instructions. And this week here we see two specific stories that I always talk about in my teaching on modesty. And the first one of them was Judah. You see, Judah was one of the brothers that sold Joseph into slavery. And, you know, there's consequences for what we do. And, you know, the story ended out really well, but it was a lot of stuff in between there that didn't end out too well. I mean, we look at what happened with Judah. First of all, we look at the mind, or at least the heart that Judah have, or at least all the other sons, other than Joseph and his brother Benjamin. We look at the heart and the mind, and we see all the strife that his sons caused him, Jacob's sons caused him. But we see specifically Judah. It says in the scriptures that Judah was going to do some business in the city, and he ended up sleeping with a prostitute who was actually his daughter-in-law. And we look what happened. You see, his daughter-in-law had married his son, and his son died. So then his other son filled the oath that they had according to Torah at that time, and said, now my other son will marry you. And she still didn't have a baby, and Judah said, I'll save my last son for you. But he didn't do that. And to make it worse, he went down to the city to do some business, and he ended up seeing a prostitute who actually he didn't know, because she had a veil over her face, was his daughter-in-law. And not only did he sleep with her, but she conceived. And not only did she conceive, she had twins. They come from a situation that wasn't too good. So, of course, the result isn't going to be pleasing and pleasant. But we all know the importance of the lines of all of Jacob's sons. And this week was so special because we see Judah. Now, Judah wasn't modest, as we could see here. He broke many of the Torah commandments by sleeping with his daughter-in-law, sleeping with a prostitute, even if he didn't know it was his daughter-in-law. But, you know, many lies and deception and selling his brother into slavery and all these different things. But then we look at Joseph. Now, Joseph was the opposite. Joseph was the righteous one. And I'm not saying he didn't, you know, bring it on himself, you know, because he was so young and naive about all his bragging that he was his father's favorite son. But Joseph was sold into slavery, and when he was in his master's house, one day, you know, the master's wife kept trying to seduce Joseph, and Joseph wouldn't give in. But one day, you know, she caught him, and she pretty much pinned him up against the wall and said, sleep with me. Now, this shows the difference between Joseph than his other brothers, and the heart and mind he had. Not only did he flee, which we're supposed to do in the scriptures, and we'll look at here what it says, we're supposed to do, flee in situations like that, flee temptation, because as I teach about modesty, you know, we don't stay and fight temptation, men. Run. I mean, if you see me running, don't say Paul's weak, say Paul's smart. I give the example all the time of Joseph. I say he was either one of the most wisest men in Scripture, strongest men in Scripture, or the lady that tried to seduce him wasn't very attractive, one or the other. But he ran. You know, if you're having an issue with temptation, or if a woman tries to seduce you, run. Don't stay around and fight temptations and mess with them, you know, your mind, and try to convince yourself that it's not an issue when it is, because it comes down to a modesty issue, and we'll look at this. But it says, this is the real special thing about Joseph, and this is why he was so special, everyone. And this is the point I'm trying to make this week. It says here, the officer whose house he was in trusted Joseph and put him in charge of every single possession. But it says here in 39:9, in this house I am equal. He hasn't withheld anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. Now, Joseph here was a loyal man. Joseph here was showing his real true colors about how his loyalty was. And even a woman seducing him, he told her straight out, no, I can't do this because I will be disloyal and to my master, number one, and also to your husband. And I'm not going to be part of this situation. I'm not going to create it. But here it is, everybody. Here is the heart of Joseph. This is what we need. This is probably one of the most significant and important scriptures of all the Bible. You need to understand. If you're in a personal relationship with Yahweh, if you want the heart of Yahweh, here it is, everybody. It says in 39:9, it says, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against Yahweh?" Joseph wasn't talking about sinning against the officer's house he was in, or sinning, creating his wife to sin and all this stuff. He said, "How could I sin against Yahweh?" And this is what we need to talk about, everybody, because that's the heart we need. Like, for example, when I teach people about health, I tell them to eat healthy, but don't do it for you. Do it for Him. So you don't have any issues with temptation or weaknesses, because, our flesh can fool us, but when we're doing things for Him, we can do all things through Him who strengthens us. And that's the heart we need. Why should I sin myself and against Him, against Yahweh? But it goes on to say here, it goes on to say in 1 Corinthians 6:18, it says, "Run from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside of the body, but a fornicator sins against his own body." I spend so much of my time, because my heart is so much for the modesty issue and taking care of this, because so many people don't guard this. There's so much divorce in the church today. There's so many issues in the church today. And we look at the difference here between Judah, who goes to sleep with a prostitute, versus the Joseph, who not only did he flee from this temptation, not only did he flee from this because he didn't want to sin against Yahweh, but it says here, as he says in Corinthians, run from sexual immorality. And that's what Joseph did. And that's the example Paul was given. But then it goes on to say in 2 Timothy 22. In 2 Timothy 22 it says, "So flee the passions of your youth." Now, I want to talk here to not just the people of their youth, but to all men out there. It says in the scriptures, a harlot or an immoral woman will bring a man to the grave like an ox led to the slaughter. And we have to realize this. We have to understand that the enemy is lurking around, just looking for somebody to devour. We have to understand the issue of modesty according to the scriptures. Please, 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 men and women, get my DVD or my CD about a modest heart. It talks all about this important issue, and it helps us be able to flee the passions of our youth. It's so imperative, everybody, because I see it being one of the biggest issues that's not discussed enough today. And this week talks about it and shows us the differences between Judah and Joseph, which we see the significance between both of them as well, because it's through the tribe of Judah and through the descendants of Joseph and Ephraim that Israel is created. And the differences that these brothers had, just like all throughout the scriptures, you've had differences up to this point with the brothers. And this was no difference. This was on a full scale, because this was now the whole nation at a difference. The descendants of Joseph and Ephraim versus Judah. They were at war. They had issues. And it leads us to many of the things we're going to be talking about. But it's so significant that we understand these things. And basically the heart we need is Joseph here telling us these things. So this week we talk about all this, and we also talk about dreams. Many people say, how can we hear from Yahweh? How do we know when we're hearing from Yahweh? Well, Joseph was a man that had some dreams, and Yahweh was telling him certain things and revealed amazing things to him, and he made Joseph a likable person, which could have perhaps been one of the reasons why he got himself in that situation anyway, to be seduced by the officer of the house he was staying in, of the wife. But he was a likable person. He had integrity. He had truth. And, when he was young, he made some mistakes. He boasted about certain things that maybe he shouldn't have, and his brothers hated him because his father loved him more. But that wasn't the reason they hated him. They didn't hate him because his father loved him more. They hated him because he rubbed it in their face. So when he was young, he made some errors, but as he got older, he became a very special, important character of the scriptures. And something very important I always talk about, it's very interesting. It says, Moses was a man who was brought up in a kingdom to lead a revolution in a desert, where Joseph was brought up in a desert to lead a revolution in a palace. Very interesting. So we look at these things and we look at how Scripture lines up. And as I say, Joseph was a remarkable man that he was able to flee the temptation that so many men succumb to today. So, we need to take examples from all of Scripture. Like I always say, you have the Torah, you have the Gospels, and you have Revelations. And all of those are excellent, excellent books to give us all the information we need, past, present, and future, about what happens, what will happen, and how to handle it and how to deal with it. But all the books in Scripture give us situations. They're great examples of how to act in a situation and the consequences that are going to happen, the way we act. Whether we act the wrong way or the right way, the situations are going to happen. We look at Judah. We look at he reacted to the situation, and we look at the trouble he got himself into. We look at Joseph. We look at the way he reacted to the situation, and we look at the blessings that he got. So it all comes full circle. That's another thing we could talk about, is how in the Scriptures it says, in the end it will be as it was in the beginning, it says in Isaiah. Well, that's so true, because everything is circular and it all comes full circle in the Scriptures. And here we see it just on a small level, but a big level. We see Joseph getting brought into captivity, thinking he'd never see his brothers again, and vice versa. But Yahweh had a plan, and his plan was that they would see each other again, and they did. And it ended up leading to the plan of the children being in Egypt, and then them coming out of Egypt and going to Israel, the promised land. So it was a plan that Yahweh had all the way from the beginning. It wasn't a let's make this plan as you go plan, or go with the flow plan. Yahweh has a plan for all of us, everybody. If we stick to his plan, we'll get the consequences and the results that he desires for us. If we get off his plan, we're on our own. But you know what? It's never too late to get back on. It's never too late. You can never be too old. But you know what? There's going to come a time when it will be too late. So stop waiting and stop taking chances. Get on board now and start being serious about reading these Torah portions, the guidelines and instructions of our Creator, and also all the other Scriptures. And start living a life as the model they set here in Scripture. And then you too can have the blessings that all the people in Scriptures had. All right, everybody. This is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. Again, I usually try to get the Torah portions out at the beginning of the week, but I'm glad I got it before Shabbat. If you have any comments or suggestions, there was a lot in this week's Torah. Just post them below the videos. And if you're in the Toronto area or know anyone it is, we're going to have a meeting tonight in the Toronto area, and then tomorrow we're going to be in London, Ontario. So just get on my website and you can see that information if you know anyone. And then we're going to be heading next Shabbat. We're actually going to be teaching in the Michigan area. So if you're in Michigan, get on my website, see that. Then we're heading down to the Chicago area, and then we're going to go to St. Louis. They're having a big conference in St. Louis the second weekend of December. So I'd love to see you all there. And it's free. So be like me and say, if it's for me, if it's free, it's for me. And get on out there. All that information on my website, everybody. Is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. Have a great day and a great Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you soon.
Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways.